All right. Hello, everyone. It's Gooey, obviously. I would hope you know that. um, Here I am doing my Q&A that I said I would do for getting 300 subscribers. So thanks to everyone again. I've just kind of assembled the questions here, and I'm just going to kind of go through them. I kind of put them in an order, but otherwise, this is going to be kind of just off the cuff, a little bit more raw. So less edited than my videos are and stuff. So don't mind that. It's just gonna be me talking, answering your questions. But yeah, thanks again, everyone, for getting me to 300. It's yeah, it's cool. And not only am I at 300, but like it's pretty active viewership, I guess I should say. Like I think a lot of people are subscribed, watch a lot of the videos and comment and stuff, and I get good feedback, and it's great hearing everyone's different opinions and getting a sense of different people's tastes and stuff like that. Just a lot of fun because that's kind of I'm trying to get mine across. So yeah. Anyway, the first kind of questions that I'm going to talk about are not really they're outside of Zelda and video games in general, but some people were curious about some stuff, so I thought, hey, this is a bit more of my tastes outside of gaming and whatnot. So we're going to talk about that. I kind of had two that I grouped together here. One from Nathan Bauman and Radiant Noir. There's a combination here of Nathan asking me if I actually play in any bands or have played in any bands in the past and what type of music I like and play, and kind of Radiant Noir also asking me what type of music I like, and also giving me some suggestions here. I've heard of most of these bands, I believe. But anyway, we could do a short answer here or a long answer. Maybe we'll do a long answer, so buckle up. If you don't want to hear me talk about music, skip ahead a little bit. But I do play music also, and listen to music, obviously. And in terms of what I just like to listen to, it's a lot of stuff. It's been all over the place throughout the years. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, I listen to everything," and it's usually not true. And even to me, that I don't truly listen to everything, but I'm pretty open-minded. Obviously, when I was a kid, it was just kind of influenced by a lot of popular culture in the 90s, so I just kind of liked a little bit everything that you could hear on the various radio formats, so like country, hip-hop, R&B, pop, and then eventually hard rock and classic rock kind of became like some of the early formative music for me. I remember the first CDs I ever bought with my own money. Not necessarily the first ones I ever had, but the first ones I bought were, and I was 11, I think, and it was like Aerosmith Greatest Hits and the first Gorillaz album, that's a pretty good album, I would say. But a lot of stuff from that era. Still, there was a period where I was kind of like, oh, that's the stuff I liked when I was a kid, but now I kind of like all that sort of stuff again, for various reasons. But yeah, stuff you hear music and stuff, and that was inspiring. So I liked, when I was a kid, I liked professional wrestling. So like especially in that era, there was all these like hard rock and new metal bands, and I always thought a lot of those were really cool. I had like the compilation CDs. I had a lot of like movie soundtracks too that had a lot of compilations. That's obviously, like, funny enough, that's like a big influencer for a lot of music taste for me, is like soundtracks I had. But yeah, like hard rock, I guess, and then eventually getting into like punk was kind of what got me into like wanting to play music, because I think there was just something accessible about it. It was just like a band or like pop punk bands like Green Day or something, where it's like very simple types of songs to learn to play and stuff. So yeah, that was like an early thing of just like you could just like learn a few chords or notes on the bass or whatever and like get in there and write a song. So that's what I liked a lot when I was kind of in that age group. I liked, kind of a lot, and I got into a lot of like punk music through there, mostly like what I could find. I didn't know a lot of like super underground stuff, but this is a lot of like what you could hear about when you hear about like the classic punk bands. So like The Clash is like still one of my favorite bands to this day, actually. But and then there were some of the like 90s and 2000s like more mainstream like punk bands. I really got into one like Against Me is still a band that I love to this day. And yeah, even that was influenced by getting like those bands were influencing to me from like the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater soundtrack, all the way back to the original one having quite a good mix of music, but there was some pop punk and ska on there and stuff. So definitely kind of widened my boundaries, I guess you could say. But yeah, when I was in like high school trying to play like really simple, silly punk music, that I ended up playing a show, and someone who ended up becoming one of my good friends played is this guy named Warren Franklin. You should look up his music. It's really good. And we bonded over a common love of Against Me, and through Warren, he actually introduced me to a lot more of my favorite bands, but one of them being The Replacements, one of my favorite bands of all time. And he also, and then I also got into like Bruce Springsteen, stuff like that. Stuff that I always kind of like that, but was really drawn to like the kind of singer songwriter nature of it. And there was like bands like Against Me covering The Replacements and Bruce Springsteen, stuff like that. But through Warren, I met like a lot of bands in the like Midwest emo scene. So there was like a band from Rockford, Illinois called Joie de Vivre. That's still a band that's really cool. And through them, they're kind of getting into playing in, I guess a lot of the bands I've played in have been kind of associated with like the Midwest emo revival, you could say. A lot of them that I met were through my friend and now current bandmate, his record label called Count Your Lucky Stars Records. So if you want a good sense of like the music I play, look up bands on that record label. I've played in a few bands on there, but I play bass mostly. And yeah, it was kind of through like pop punk to like pop punk bands with emo leanings. Like I played in a band called The Please and Thank Yous. That was like my first real band I played in that kind of had a mix of both. That's kind of how I got into playing like emo, which has never been like my first love, but I kind of grown to really like a lot of the more of the 90s and early 2000s, like The Promised Ring, for example, is a band I've grown to like. They've become one of my favorite bands for sure. But yeah, I play a lot of that, a lot of bass and a lot of that. I'm currently in a band called Annabelle, and have a newer band. We just had a release come out. The band is called Parting. And yeah, I play bass in that band, and it's got members of me and my bandmate in Annabelle, and my friend who I mentioned who runs the label, Keith. I've played in a band with him before called Empire. And yeah, so I've played bass mostly and guitar and a lot of stuff, but I kind of learned bass on the fly, really. I was playing like really crappily in like high school, and then I was actually just, I think because I just had a van, this band, they're still around. It's a great band, The Please and Thank Yous. They wanted to use my van for a tour like 10 years ago, and I was like, okay, but I'm gonna come. And then right before the tour, two of their members quit, and I wasn't very good, but I was like, you know what, I'm coming with. I'll just learn all the bass parts really quick and hop on this tour. And from there I never looked back. I just started joining a bunch of bands playing bass, and I'm not very good, really. I just kind of always did my best to learn songs and eventually, write songs. And so I'm not the most well-trained bass player or anything, but I've had a lot of fun. I'm still making music, and yeah, and I've dabbled in other stuff. One thing that might be fun to look up is I played in this band. We only played one show, but we did record, called Sushi Backpack with my good friend Ben, and I played the drums on it very poorly. But yeah, I guess, yeah, that's the long music story. But I guess if you just wanted to know kind of the timeless gooey bands, it would be The Clash, The Replacements, Against Me, Bruce Springsteen, and I guess I don't know if they're a timeless band, but they're kind of big for me back in the day. It was like Green Day, I guess. So yeah, now you've got a sense of the music I like and the bands I've played in. All right, maybe you can do... Wow, that was a long answer, but hopefully you enjoyed that. All right, now we've got a question from Jonathan Savigny. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but Jonathan asks, you often wear Star Trek shirts. Can I ask you to quickly rank the different shows? And yes, I love Star Trek. I actually also host a Star Trek podcast called Backtrekking. So look that up if you are curious about hearing me talk about Star Trek. But my favorite Star Trek show is actually Deep Space Nine. I think it's just the best written of all the shows. I think it really deconstructs and kind of examines the Star Trek world in a way that modern Star Trek shows try to do, but I don't think they totally get there. It's got a sweet spot of amazing, most episodes are self-contained, well-written stories while also driving forward this narrative arc that from the beginning first episode of the show all the way to the end tells a very satisfying story. So that's number one. But a lot of that, it's great on its own, but I think what makes it even better is if you've been a longtime Star Trek fan and you've watched all of the original series and my next favorite, which I would say is The Next Generation, which it's obviously a classic show as well. That establishes so much. It's so well written. Also some amazing episodes there. But it's just below the Deep Space Nine to me. It's not quite as I don't want to say Deep Space Nine is flawless, but I just think it's such a nice little package. And Next Gen, it rocks also. Just below it, really. And just below that, I would probably put the original series, or maybe even above it if you're throwing in like the movies, because I think there's a more amazing handful of original series movies compared to like the next gen movies. Kind of a shame we didn't get Deep Space Nine movies, but the original series, classic show, it rocks. I mean, what more can you say? It's just just great classic science fiction adventure show, and yeah, I love it. After that, honestly, I think it's gonna surprise people, but I think I'm gonna rewatch it soon. But Enterprise actually I think it's a really good show. I think it has certain flaws to it, and there's certain things, it's kind of rough in the beginning, but I think it actually does a good job of kind of telling some more long form stories while also having some nice self-contained ones too, and builds upon the lore and stuff in a fun way. It's kind of held back by being a prequel, and it does have a sick theme song though. Yeah, I mean it's not perfect, but I think it's actually a lot more respectable than people make it out to be. It does run into a problem too of like sometimes they get to storylines that I feel like they've already done in at least like 2 previous series of Star Trek before. They're kind of recycling premises and stuff, and I guess that just happens when you're on your like 4th series, not counting movies. So, but yeah, I think it's great. Below that, I would put Voyager, which has some awesome episodes, but I think oftentimes fails its like premise, and it also has like a handful of characters who I think are just totally uninteresting. Though I do like B'Elanna Torres. I like the Doctor. Captain Janeway's cool, but I think overall sometimes it lets itself down. Doesn't fully live out its premise, and sometimes it lets its characters down too, who could be a lot more interesting. Even some of the ones that I don't like as much, there's something to them, but it does have some really sweet episodes at the same time. So even still, we're talking about a pretty decent show. After that, it gets a little trickier. I guess I would say, I actually haven't seen all of it, but I like the original animated series. It's so wild, that I kind of love it. It's just so, the pacing is ridiculous, and it tells like these sometimes heavy hitting stories, but for like try to make it for children, and they can like convey things that you can't normally show in like a live action show. So I actually like it for that. So I'll probably put it there. Then I don't know, maybe Lower Decks. I don't think it's like a great show. It's kind of just like hey, you remember all these like Trek references, particularly like the 90s era, so it's kind of meant to appeal to people like my age, but like it's also like, but it's Rick and Morty kind of humor. It's fine. It's a fine show, I guess. I kind of watch it and I'm like not offended by it. It's just kind of like good to have on in the background. Then after that, it's like the 2 current shows. Well, I guess they have those short treks, which are like hit or miss, but the 2 like current series they have on, live action wise, I'm just not really that into. Picard had some moments. It has some moments for sure. But overall, I didn't think it was great. It definitely had some promise, and Discovery is I just don't like it, I guess. I keep hoping each season is like it's gonna be what I think it should be. It kind of actually reminds me of, it's like got the problems of Voyager and Enterprise, where at first I feel like it was hampered by being like a prequel sort of, and trying to fit in the universe, and then now that it's like in the future, I feel like it's not living up to its premise, I think. Especially the last season with like the burn or whatever was going on. But yeah, I don't love it. But that's fine. Whatever, if you like it, it's fine. It's just not for me. And part of me is like sort of old person yelling at cloud or whatever, but I'm sort of like, can we I don't know. Maybe that's what I like about Lower Decks, but I like that it is like these kind of self-contained stories. I know, like, I don't know, current show things are different, but it's just really, it doesn't give you a chance to like fall in love with some of the the side characters, who I don't know. I think all the actors are great and stuff. I think the production is cool. I actually don't really think the directing is all too great. I do love Jonathan Frakes, but I think in general that's not great. And then I think I think it's just the writing I really don't like. But anyway, that's my Trek ranking. I love Star Trek. Deep Space Nine is, I think, the greatest show I've ever seen. All right. let's get into video game questions. I got two similar questions here, one from my buddy Kevin and one from Jackson Jones, who were both kind of asking, like, if I get done or if I could do a series like the Dungeon Dives, but for something that's not Legend of Zelda, what would I choose? And that's kind of interesting because the way I do this is like, I play through the game, I play through a dungeon, I stop, then I evaluate it, make the video, continue, and I try to look at them in the context of, like, sort of on their own, but also in, like, where I am in the game, you know? Like, okay, this is the first dungeon, you know, and kind of have that be a factor. Other series that I think about that have kind of similar level design, it's like, instead of, like, the dungeons being their own kind of segment, I think of things like Metroidvanias or like Resident Evil games where they have that sort of design, but it goes across the whole game. So it would be harder to do it this way, but like those are kind of things that I find interesting in that regard, I guess. Someone suggested Mario levels, which is a fun idea. You could maybe do like the worlds, especially when you get to like Mario 64, where it's like slightly more divided up into very distinct worlds. But anyway, with the things like the Metroidvanias or Resident Evil, it's like, yeah, the whole world is kind of this interconnected things, and it's like you could do the regions, or like, you know, if you're doing like RE2, it's like, okay, there's the police station, and then there's the underground part, and then there's like the lab. But or like Hollow Knight, here's like the Forgotten Crossroads and the crystal part and the whatever the moss area is called. You know what I mean? But it's like they all are, it's so interconnected that it's like you couldn't do it like just play the part and then come back, because you're like doing a lot more backtracking and coming back, whereas like it's very limited that you do that in a Zelda dungeon. And so like it almost would make sense to either do it like as a whole, which like I know like Mark Brown, for example, did like Boss Keys videos on like Hollow Knight and Symphony of the Night and Super Metroid. They kind of just look at the whole game. But you could also do it by area. Like I know the Omega Metroid podcast has a segment called Mapping Metroid. They do episodes where they take an area from a Metroid game and break down that area and stuff. And you could totally do that after playing, you know, it's like they're just like now going into it as a one-off, but you could do it for the whole game, just segment by segment, kind of after having beaten it, you know, and then kind of looking at it like, how does it fit together? But it would just be different. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I would really like to do, like, even though I like the Mario games, I don't think that would be for me. I do like the Resident Evil games, but again, like those areas, it's like there's like 3 areas per game, but I guess you could do that. Could be fun. Something like Hollow Knight or Symphony of the Night could be cool to do all those more unique areas, but I feel like less qualified to talk about those. Like, whereas like I'm not like a Zelda expert by any means. Like a lot of the commenters know more about Zelda than I do, it seems, but I do feel qualified to talk about it because I've played all these games so many times that, yeah, I just feel like I do have a decent enough knowledge base to at least not speak like, I'm not trying to be authoritative, but to at least try to get my opinion across. So whereas like the other games, I just wouldn't feel I feel a bit more nervous trying to do that, I guess. But yeah, so I don't know. I guess I don't know. Maybe what about Super Smash Brothers stages? That'd be kind of fun, right? Okay. So yeah, we got some Zelda questions now, not dungeon related or series dungeon dive related, but James Oakley here is asking if there's any Zelda games I haven't 100%ed, and it's actually like most of them, really. Um, some of the ones where there's like not a lot of collectibles, I guess I've 100%ed those. Um, just because it's almost like not much else to do. But I don't really 100% games. That's not really my play style. I like to come in, the explore, the adventure, poke around for some stuff, but I'm not gonna like uh bend over backwards for everything, and I really don't like looking at a guide just to get everything. But some of the games where it's made it easy to, or like give you kind of a something to track or whatever, like the Bomber's Notebook and Majora's Mask I have, or like the My Mi's in A Link Between Worlds, where it kind of makes it fun, like you're checking off a box. Even then, I think I probably didn't do like every single thing in the game, but I got like most of the major collectibles. But yeah, I don't know. I've only maybe like only a handful of the games I've actually 100%ed. It's just not my style really. All right, we got a few character questions. So Taylor G asks, I like this question. Since Tingle got his own game, what are a few other, dare I say, better characters that you wish would get a Zelda spin-off title of their own? Let's take Zelda out since I feel like she's an obvious pick. Yeah, there's a lot of different cool obvious Zelda ones. So like the Sheik game, or I feel like a pirate game could be cool too, like a Tetra game. But I'm not allowed to say that. So first of all, I think Tingle, especially at the time those games came out, was really the best choice. He was such a force at that time, and it really made sense to make these like weird games with him at that time. And I love it. I love that those exist. I want to play those someday. I haven't, but I want to. Right now, I'm thinking of, who in this moment would be like the perfect person or character to have that game spin off. And I think it might already also exist, because I'm thinking with Breath of the Wild, kind of the standout characters, or like the most unique looking ones, the funnest looking ones, are the champions. And I guess we kind of got Age of Calamity, and I think that's fun if you wanted more story and stuff going on with them. It's not really my favorite type of game to play, but I think that might be the best option currently. Otherwise, I mean, anything else I could come up with would be kind of goofy. So yeah, I don't know. I guess there could be that. Yeah, I think right now you could do almost anything though. I think I liked how they had Cadence of Hyrule kind of crossover with Zelda. I think that's more what I want to see, is more like other people kind of get a shot and do like their take on Zelda, on like a Zelda game, but in like X style. So if there's a character that fit that sort of style or genre, like that's what I would go with. All right, now my co-host Andy Spiteri on Virtual Theater here asks, this is a good question too. Which character, be it a villain, NPC, or main character, had the most wasted potential in the series that you thought could have been really cool or had a really awesome story but just never happened? I sort of talked about this on like the more recent Tier Force Heroes videos, but I personally feel like just some of the characters in Twilight Princess didn't like fully connect with me, especially as I go back to them, and I really feel like I just wanted more. Like I didn't even dislike them. I just wanted more. And I know like the game's already so long, so I don't know what form I would want that to take, but I feel like with both like the main like kind of Midna Zant stuff, and then also like kind of the human elements of that, of like there's a decent amount with the kids, but like the resistance, I think there could have been more to do with them that could be interesting. And I've said it before, but like it seems like the manga is fleshing out that stuff a lot more. I've only read the first book, but I want to read more. So I guess that's the main thing I would say. And then I don't know if he needs to be in more games, but um, I feel like it'd be cool, like maybe if Vati had something else, but I think what he got was appropriate at the same time. It's kind of cool to have some of these people be sort of special, I guess. Like Varen is a cool villain. I don't really think I would add her to more stuff. Um, Maybe Onyx, just because he's not really doing much in that game. That'd be maybe cool if they had done something more with him in Oracle of Seasons. But yeah, I think that's a fair. I think that's a fair answer I gave. Bryce, buddy Bryce, says, "What is the best quest in Zelda?" I think we're talking side quest here, right? Because the best quest is like probably the best game too, right? But we did do over on the Zelda Dungeon channel. We did do a Hyrule Compendium where we did like our favorite side quests, and I think we did like Anju and Kafai as number one, but we did some other unique ones. But yeah, I mean, that would probably be like the one that sticks out to me is the most memorable. But yeah, probably Anju and Kafai. All right, I got two side by side questions here. One from Master Quest and one from Game Boy, and they're both about remakes. So we'll start with the Master Quest one because they're distinct. But they ask, if you could choose one 2D Zelda game to be remade for the Switch, which one would you choose and why? And I don't know, I feel like with like the original and A Link to the Past, they're on there with the online thing, and I think they should just be left kind of how they are. I don't think there's really too much you need to do with them. There's certainly a lot about the first that people don't really love, but I think it is what it is. There's no reason I think to remake that. I think the obvious one a lot of people go for is the ones that aren't on there, the Oracles or Minish Cap, just so we could play those on the Switch would be nice. And yeah, maybe remake them. Maybe just like some quality of life updates would be nice. But I don't know. I don't know if I need to see like a whole reimagining of them. I mean, could be cool. I think Zelda 2 would be cool to either see a remake or just like a new game in that style, especially with like how hot either like side-scrolling games or like Metroidvanias have become, like just to see what they could do. I think I said this already, but like just let someone else do their spin on it, like we had Crypt of the Necro Dancer gone Zelda style. Like it'd be cool if it was like, let the Shovel Knight people, who are obviously very influenced by Zelda 2, do their spin on it, and kind of modernize it. That'd be cool to see. And then Game Boy asks, if Nintendo had to remake any 2D Zelda game as a 3D game and a 3D game as a 2D, what would be your picks and why? That's interesting. I don't know. I guess, I mean, they've sort of, I wouldn't say it's a remake, but they, a lot of people say like, oh, Zelda 1 is Breath of the Wild is that. And maybe it gets that spirit, but I feel like A Link to the Past, it's not a remake, but they kind of transferred it into the third dimension with Ocarina of Time in a lot of ways. So I think that's just sort of already happened, I guess. Maybe like a Four Swords game, just to have like a multiplayer. Yeah, I don't know about that one. I think they're just different. It's a different style of gameplay, so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know. In terms of 3D game into 2D, um, hmm, maybe. Well, I guess they kind of had the Wind Waker setting in Phantom Hourglass, and that was kind of that. But maybe it would be cool to see like a more that Wind Waker style in like pixel form or something, like a 2D pixel art sea exploration game, and it could be more open, kind of like the original Legend of Zelda, but you got a boat and stuff. Um, that'd be cool. I don't know why you would do a remake of anything, but maybe yeah, like a game set in a world like that, but in like a different 3D versus 2D. That could be cool, I guess. Eerie Acid asks, if you were an NPC, which iteration of Hyrule would you live in? Who would be your neighbor? What side quests would you have for Link? That's a good question. I think, it's cool. Like, well, some of the nice places I think to live are like also like heavily in danger, like Clock Town or anywhere in Breath of the Wild is kind of a little scary, I guess you could say. Maybe Terrytown seems like the most pleasant. It's certainly the most beautiful world to look at. Yeah, just a nice quaint little town. Yeah, I think I'd want to live in Terrytown. Quests for Link. He could I could order delivery. He could get my deliveries. Do my laundry if he wants. He could Gus Bellows my house. Yeah, just do my chores. I don't really have much else going. Like if he wants to edit some videos for me, that would help out a lot because sometimes that can get really draining. Yeah, maybe if he wants to be like my producer and just take some of the editing workload off my plate, that would be pretty good. I don't know if Terrytown has like a studio space. I guess I could just have my own. Yeah, let's go with that. Now we got some dungeon questions. From Super Mega 99, we got, what dungeon themes would you like Zelda to explore outside of elemental themes like fire, water, grass, ice, etc.? And that's a great question. I always I think the cool stuff they've done outside of that stuff is like when they have like kind of a unique setting, like something like the Sand Ship or something like that, where it's like you're also at a place. I think a long time ago on like a video I pitched like having a dungeon that's like a city. That could be kind of cool. Where it's like, I guess I don't even know, maybe it could be like a more mechanical city too, where you can like, more so than just like do a few things. It's like you can like move the city around somehow, some sort of like sci-fi steampunky element to it or something. That could be kind of cool. Yeah, anything where it's like you just kind of like give it a real feel to it, like a unique sort of setting would be cool. Yeah, the city would probably be cool because I think we've done the elementals. And yeah, if there's just any sort of like, yeah, if there's just any cool theme that you could base it around, that'd be cool. Let me know in the comments any other like locations that you think would make for a good Zelda dungeon. Vivi Wivy asks, is there any game you'd like to see one more dungeon in? If so, what sort of dungeon would you like to see? For some reason, the first thing that comes to mind, I guess, is Wind Waker. For a few reasons, I guess, just thinking about like, how I would like to just get into the action a little bit more in that game. So maybe it could have even been something kind of minor, but like when you go up to save Tetra at the top of Outset Island. Maybe there could have been like a little mini dungeon there, you know, kind of like how in your little home area in Ocarina of Time, you kind of just get to go right into the Deku Tree. And if I could really, I'd add 2 dungeons, because I think it's kind of a bummer that they took out the Jaboon one, or like that just doesn't have a dungeon there, and instead it's kind of this long, almost unskippable, like you have to do this segment. That would be cool. So yeah, my answer would be Wind Waker, and I'd add 2. Okay, Swimmer690 says, what is the worst dungeon in the series? And I mean, we're gonna find out, aren't we? On this show. I guess right now it's like whatever I forgot what it's at the bottom, but I don't know. I'm not someone who, like, some people just like hate certain dungeons. I just don't really think there's much that's like worth hatred, you know? Like, most are interesting. I don't know, like, so even if I ever say like, oh, I really don't like this one, like, I really don't think anything is awful, but I guess we'll see. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have like a full-blown answer for that, I guess. At least not yet. Speaking of which, a new bite asks, will you ever forgive me for my hatred of Majora's Mask temples? And yeah, that's that's an example of someone I see who says like, I don't think it's just Majora's Mask, right? There's other ones that you've said like, I hate this dungeon, bottom of the list, hate this dungeon. And you know, that's fine. I think there's certain gameplay, like there's dungeons I've mentioned in videos where they have a segment that I just like think is awful and sucks, but like it doesn't, it's like one bad part doesn't fully bring it down, you know? And yeah, I don't know, if you don't like the Majora's Mask temples, that's fine. I don't care. But yeah, thanks for your question. All right, Corey. We all know and love Corey. Says, pick one and only one. Locked door heavy, unpick the knot type dungeon, or dungeon changing central mechanic puzzle box type dungeon. And I guess if you look at the top of my list, it's more of the dungeon changing type thing that I think is more unique. But again, it really, as long as it just plays into the theme and the setting, kind of what I mentioned before with like the sand ship or something. Right now, my top one is Great Bay, and I think it's a perfect example of that, where it's like, it's not just a change the dungeon mechanic, but it's really got a cool theme where it's like, it feels like you're in a factory, and it plays into the gameplay and the setting both. Like, they're all in tandem. They're all in lockstep, I guess you could say. So I guess there's that. And then those even have, you know, where like in those dungeons, like the keys are supplementary to the exploration. So they're still kind of crucial. You could probably do the dungeon without them, but I think they just add a little bit more complexity to their own knot that they have. So yeah, that would probably be my answer, but you know, nothing. I love the classic knot picking. So, but yeah, puzzle box, sure, number one. Okay, and from Jamie Hauk, we have the question: has playing these games with a focus on just the dungeons and not the game as a whole changed your opinion on a game, be it good or bad? Not necessarily, because the way I'm doing it, I'm still, like I mentioned, I'm trying to like play it in the context of the game, you know? So like, granted, there's a lot of things I'm not doing, but I'm still playing the game fairly casually, and I'm trying to kind of take in the story too. Some games that doesn't really matter as much, but so overall, I'm still trying to get the experience of the game, though. I guess one thing is like, it's cool. It'll change my opinion on the games, like maybe the dungeons and how they are as a set, you know. So that, like, that's haven't gone very far yet. I've only done a handful of games, but it's something like Link's Awakening, like that's just like a good collection, like a nice solid collection of dungeons, so like that definitely just paints my opinion a little bit of like, yeah, it's got good dungeons, but I'm not like, I don't feel like I'm like sort of neglecting other parts of the game, and certainly the dungeons are a big part of it, but like there's definitely other things at play, but I'm still trying to get in the story and how the dungeons fit into the story and the pacing of the game, all that stuff still. But anytime I replay a game, it's still it always changes my opinion, because I'll notice something that I like more or less. But yeah, that happens anytime I play it with a focus on anything. Good question though. The unpopular Cuber, I'm sorry, not popular, asks, what game's dungeons do you think will be hardest to rank? That I'm not sure. Because, I haven't had a hard time necessarily, like, sometimes it is a little bit like apples to oranges a little bit, like comparing, I don't know, the lizard to the Dongos Cavern or something, but, you just kind of gotta go with your gut a little bit, and it's my personal taste too. It's certainly not a objective measure or whatever, so just kind of trying to do the best I can. I feel like the DS games will be interesting because they're more specifically puzzle based than anything. So like I feel like the overall dungeon design of those just isn't the focus, like the macro design, and it's more about the little puzzle challenges. Granted, they do have, some weaving back and forth between areas, but I feel like it's pretty limited. That one, it's the big central dungeons that you return to that are kind of the unique thing, but I don't know, some are just so different, I guess, that maybe it'll be hard, but I don't think so. I think even something like the Divine Beasts, there are things to hook onto and to kind of compare them and stuff like that. I sort of had two questions here from Pellegrinat and Arik McDaniel, both kind of asking if I'm going to do the multiplayer games, if I'm going to do them, and I'm probably not. I know people say like they're canon games or whatever, but they're just so different that like it's almost its own thing, like every level, they're all levels, it just doesn't totally fit, and canonicity or whatever doesn't necessarily matter to me in that regard. But yeah, I guess if you want to hear my thoughts on them, we do over on Zelda Dungeon, we have done a definitive ranking of Four Swords, and we're gonna do the other ones eventually. So there, I'll talk about them, and then I don't know, maybe someday I'll get to them. I'll come up with something, but I feel like it'll really grind things to a halt if I start talking about every level in Four Swords Adventures. Like I don't know if you know how many there are, but they're quite a bit. So yeah, no, I'm not gonna be covering them in the initial run, really. So sorry about that. All right, Hero of Sign has kind of this is a pretty great question, I think. So first they ask, how do you typically go about balancing themes and aesthetic of a dungeon against the fundamental gameplay? As in, would you rather play a simple dungeon with memorable moments, or a dungeon that are more complex but less memorable? And that's a great question, because I definitely think, the level design and the dungeon design is really important, but it's also got to be fun, but I think ones where it works in tandem is where it's at. Like kind of what I mentioned with Great Bay earlier, where it's like it's got this cool, complex design, but it really also does feed into the the aesthetic of the dungeon. But at the same time, like, if a dungeon has one kind of simple concept that it executes well on, like that can be enough. Like I haven't covered it yet, but I feel like I like Temple of Time and Twilight Princess. It's a very straightforward linear dungeon, but it's really built around a specific experience that I think is a lot of fun. So that could be considered good, I think. Or even like a Great Deku Tree is an example of like really it's just like one puzzle in there that really I think is so sweet, on top of like just being a great tutorial that like makes it really all worth it. And I think some of the dungeons like in Ocarina of Time that I think people might be surprised that I didn't go as high on, I felt like could have had cool moments like that, but they were like sometimes let down in certain ways. So yeah, like I think there's definitely a yin and yang, but as you can see, my top dungeons are pretty complex, but I also think they usually have a pretty cool thematic tie as well. But like I'm gonna talk about it in the upcoming series, but I think like Dancing Dragon Dungeon is one in Oracle of Seasons coming up that I think is just really cool gameplay wise, and because of how wild it is, it really feels like it just does latch all these kind of disparate elements together, all these different gameplay elements into like a new package just through like the dungeon design, but also like the fun gameplay. And so that's like a third quadrant. There's like the dungeon design, the level design, the theme, and just like the general moment to moment gameplay. And yeah, it's kind of on a triangular, you could almost make like a triangle chart or something out of it, where they're on these different axes, and there's strengths to all of them for sure. That's actually what's important to think about, is like I'm definitely ranking all of these like individually, and you'll see like my personal taste come to the top. But I think what's important in a game is to not every dungeon should be Great Bay Temple, or every dungeon should be the Water Temple, like, or whatever, even though that's the ones I like more. But like I like there being a variety and like a different way of presenting it. Even like in the games where it's just like Link's Awakening, where you have keys and locks, like they do a good job of like having a different, you know, like Key Cavern is one where you collect a bunch of keys and spend them all at once, ideally, or Angler's Tunnel or whatever, where you see the whole dungeon first before you really start get the flippers, and then you go back, you know. So like I don't know, just like a good variety is good between linear and non-linear. And yeah, there's a second part to this question actually. How much do you take into account the thoughts of boss keys and other people when ranking dungeons? Not really at all when I'm ranking necessarily. Boss keys, I was obviously, that was an inspirational series for me. It articulated a lot of feelings I've had about like the dungeons over the years, and kind of it definitely inspired me to be like, because that's my favorite thing in the series is the dungeons. So I was like, I've always wanted something that kind of broke down and talk about all of them. And I'm definitely, I don't get as in depth, even though I talk about the specific dungeons. I'm not like I wouldn't make a good game designer or anything. I'm just trying to articulate what I like. But anyway, I've watched all of those, but I'm not like referring to that as it's not like that's also someone kind of presenting their tastes in a way, though they do present it sometimes as like, this is like, because they have the whole like game maker's toolkit. Sometimes I feel like watching that, they're like, this is what you should do if you want to have a good experience for players. But I don't think that's always true. Like I think, you know, when you make a game, you just make what's in your heart or whatever. But anyway, it's a great series. I don't consider it though when ranking the dungeons, and I don't look at other things really. But I've just seen so many different discussions of dungeons over the years that I kind of know, like, you know, sometimes when I'm ranking something, I'm like, I think people disagree with this or whatever. There's been a few times where I was like, am I crazy for doing this? And I'll be like, Corey, where are you gonna put this? Am I crazy? Where are you gonna put this? And then usually just kind of I don't know. Sometimes I'm just unsure, and I end up changing things. But yeah, I don't take the accounts of others, because, like I said, this is list. It's not. This is not a. There could never be an objective list. Really, but specifically, this is me presenting my tastes and opinions on what I think make for cool dungeons, and I encourage other people to comment their lists, and some people do. I always like seeing other people's lists in the comments after a video's come out. Kind of ranking along or seeing what other people like. But yeah, definitely don't. It's purely based on just my experience replaying that dungeon this time around. And then otherwise, all the research I purely do is to get, like certain assets or the maps, or like, looking up something I forgot or whatever. And okay, our final question is from Carrie G, and it is, I guess I sort of touched on a similar thing earlier, but they ask, what are your thoughts? What's your thought process in your approach to merging 2D dungeons and 3D dungeons on the same list and making sure both styles get a fair shake? And I don't really have a big process for it, really. I just kind of just go with my feelings on, I like this more than this. I think both, I've mentioned it before, I've tried to push back on, there's people who say just like the 3D, they're just inherently better, or they inherently have an advantage. And I don't think that's true. I think they're different mediums. It's, to me, like talking about the difference between something animated or like live action or something in a movie, where there are things you can do and different things you can get across in one medium and not so much the other. You can get across similar things or like whatever, but overall I think it's painting, it's like painting with a different brush or whatever. It's just like a different style. So that being said, I have my own personal preferences. But I think it has less, I don't know if it has less to do with, like, I think in 3D, when done well, they can kind of be my favorite type of thing, like the Majora's Mask ones I put high. And I think it has less to do with because they're in 3D, but I think overall the 3D games just have, I don't like the dungeons as much, but I think it's more of, I think it has less to do with them being in 3D and more of like the choices they were making at that time. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't have like a deep consideration of it. I mean, you hear most of my consideration in the videos. Like when I kind of try to talk it out. I do edit out some of that because there's like long parts where I'm just staring at the list, like, where do I put this? But overall, you kind of hear me working it out. Sometimes I look ahead and I'm like, try to get an idea of a range, so I just know where to start of where I want to rank it. But yeah, overall, I'm just kind of doing that live. So yeah, thank you for all of your questions. This was a lot of fun. This is much longer than I thought. Hopefully this is good for everyone. It's gonna be, I don't know, probably a little bit more, few more weeks until Seasons comes out. As of recording this, I'm like halfway through the game, and this time I do want to commit to just being fully done with it and done with all the videos and then releasing them, because then I just take more time to kind of enjoy it and see what the discussion is and stuff. And it'll be more, I think it'll be more fun for me that way. But I don't know. This was really fun too, doing this. I'm not sure what then, maybe 400, 500, we'll do something else. Let me know what you think about, I don't know. Let me know if there's other things you'd like to see me do. If I see a good idea, I could pursue it, but I'm not going to make any promises. If I didn't answer your question, I answered pretty much every question, but if I didn't, I tried to reply to ones that I didn't answer in the video. Mostly because I just don't, it wouldn't have been very exciting to hear me talk about it. But yeah, I appreciate everyone for subscribing and everything. So yeah, thank you so much. I'll see you in Oracle of Seasons.